हेलो फ्रेंड्स, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। आज हम पढ़ने वाले हैं काकी। चैप्टर 6 काकी। Let's read a story about an old person living with her nephew and his family. Old age is similar to childhood in many ways. Old Kaki was like a child. For the most part of the day, she would lie down. Frail and hard of hearing, she had lost all her interest in life, except her craving for food. If she did not get her meal at the appointed time, she would begin wailing. तो इस पैराग्राफ का ये मतलब है कि ओल्ड एज जो है, बुढ़ापा, वो बचपना की तरह ही है। तो इस एग्जाम्पल में एक ओल्ड काकी आती है जो एक बच्ची की तरह ही है। वो दिन का ज़्यादातर समय वो ऐसे ही पड़े रहती थी। शी वुड लाई डाउन। और वो अपने लाइफ में उनका कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं था, उनको जीने का कोई मन नहीं था। लेकिन उनको अगर उनके अपॉइंटेड टाइम पर खाना नहीं मिलता था, शी वुड बिगिन वेलिंग। वो मतलब कि वो रोना शुरू कर देती थी अनहैप्पीनेस के चलते। Kaki had no one except her nephew Budhiram to depend upon and had given him all her property. He in turn had promised to look after her. Budhiram was gentle by nature as long as his pocket remained untouched. इसका ये मतलब है कि काकी का दूसरा कोई नहीं था, उसका खुद का नेफ्यू बुधिराम को छोड़कर, जिस पे वो डिपेंड रह सकती थी। और वो बुधिराम को उन्होंने अपना सारा प्रॉपर्टी दे दिया था। और बुधिराम ने उन्हें बदले में प्रॉमिस किया था कि वो उनका पूरा उनका पूरा उम्र, वो जितना अभी रहेंगी उनका वो ख्याल रखेंगे। पर वो नहीं ऐसा की, पर वो अपने वादे पर अमल नहीं रहे। बुधिराम नेचर से जेंटल है जब तक उनका पॉकेट अनटच्ड रहता था। अब he knew that he was able to wear a cloak of respectability only because of the property that Kaki had given him. He sometimes regretted his cruel behavior, but the very thought of incurring any additional expense suppressed his good intentions. His wife Rupa was sharp-tongued, but she was God-fearing. Budhiram's son were also rude to Kaki and teased her for fun. तो यहाँ बोला गया है कि बुधिराम को इतना रिस्पेक्ट मिल रहा है क्योंकि काकी का प्रॉपर्टी की वजह से, जो काकी ने बुधिराम को दिया है। कभी कभी जब बुधिराम सोचता है कि हाँ वो बहुत क्रूएल हो जाता है काकी से, लेकिन फिर उसका जो गुड थॉट्स है ना, वो कि दब जाता है। फिर वो ख़त्म हो जाता है उनका गुड थॉट्स। उनकी वाइफ जो थी, उनका नाम था रूपा। वो शार्प टंग और गॉड फियरिंग थी। शार्प टंग मतलब कि कुछ भी बोले जाना, बिना कोई सोचे समझे हार्श लैंग्वेज यूज़ करती थी। और बट वो गॉड फियरिंग भी थी, भगवान से वो डरती थी। अब बुधिराम के जो बेटे हैं वो भी काकी से रूड थे और उनको वो टीज करते थे फन के लिए। अब क्या है यहाँ, इन द एंटायर फैमिली इट वॉज ओनली बुधिराम्स लिटिल डॉटर लाडली हु केयर्ड फॉर काकी. When her brothers teased her, Ladli ran to Kaki. This meant that she had to give a part of her food to Kaki, but she did not mind. वो पूरे फैमिली में सिर्फ बुधिराम की वो बेटी ही थी लाडली, जो काकी का ध्यान रखती थी। जब लाडली के भाई लोग जब काकी को टीज करते थे, लाडली काकी के पास दौड़ कर जाती थी। इसका ये मतलब है कि वो अपने पार्ट का जो खाना है, उसका लाडली का जो खाना रहता था, वो उसमें से शेयर देती थी, लेकिन अपना शेयर देती थी काकी को, लेकिन उसको कोई एतराज़ नहीं था उस पर। अब one evening the house was filled with the sound of the shehnai. Budhiram's son Sukhram was getting engaged. Women were singing in the house. Guests were relaxing and eating to their heart's content. एक शाम क्या होता, वो पूरा हाउस जो था वो शहनाई का आवाज़ से गूंज रहा था, क्योंकि बुद्धिराम का जो बेटा है सुखराम, उसका इंगेजमेंट था। बहुत सारे गेस्ट्स थे। रूपा वॉज बिजी सुपरवाइजिंग द प्रिपरेशन ऑफ फूड फॉर द गेस्ट. बिग कढ़ाईज वर प्लेस्ड ऑन ओपन एयर फायर प्लेसेस. पूरीज, कचोरीज एंड स्पाइसी करीज वर बीन कुक्ड. द अरोमा ऑफ घी एंड स्पाइसेस वॉज इन द एयर. मतलब कि रूपा जो थी वो सब वर्कर्स लोग को उन लोग का काम बताने में बिजी थी। बहुत सारा बड़ा बड़ा कढ़ाई सब बन रहा था ओपन एयर फायर प्लेसेस में। पूरी बन रहा था, कचौड़ीज बन रहा था, बहुत स्पाइसी कढ़ीज बन रहा था। और वो जो महक है ना, अरोमा मतलब महक होता है, तो जो महक है घी और स्पाइसेस का वो हवा में था, बहुत मतलब हवा का एयर के साथ वो मिक्स हो गया था। Kaki was sitting in a dark room. The aroma of food made her uneasy. She was wondering whether she would get her share of the puris. It was so late. No one had bought her any food. तो यहाँ बोला गया है कि काकी जो थी वो अपने रूम में चुपचाप बैठी हुई थी, लेकिन वो जो सुगंध है ना खाना का, वो काकी को मतलब कि और भूख दिला रहा था, उनको अनईजी फील करवा रहा था। काकी सोच रही थी कि क्या उनको अपना खुद का खाने का शेयर मिल पाएगा या नहीं, या सब ख़त्म हो जाएगा। और बहुत लेट भी हो गया था, कोई भी काकी के लिए खाना नहीं लाया था। इट सीम टू हर दैट एवरी वन हैड ईटन एंड देयर वॉज नथिंग लेफ्ट फॉर हर। शी वॉन्टेड टू क्राई बट फियरिंग दैट दिस वुड बी इनऑस्पिशियस शी कंट्रोल्ड हर सेल्फ। वो उनको लगा कि सब कोई गेस्ट वेस्ट सब कोई खा चुके हैं और उनके लिए कुछ नहीं बचा, सारा कुछ गेस्ट्स खा लिए। अब वो रोना चाहती थी बट वो नहीं रोई, क्योंकि वो एक मतलब कि बहुत एक खुशी का त्यौहार है, तो वो इसे मतलब कि रो के वो इसे अनलकी नहीं करना चाहती थी, अशुभ नहीं करना चाहती थी। तो वो अब खुद को कंट्रोल की। द फ्रेगनेंस ऑफ घी एंड स्पाइसेस मेड हर माउथ वाटर। इफ ओनली शी कुड टेक वन पूरी इन her hands to feel it. Kaki made up her mind to go and watch the puris being fried. Crouching on her hands and feet, Kaki slowly crossed the threshold and crept close to the कढ़ाई and sat down. वो जो घी और स्पाइसेस का जो महक है ना, उनका माउथ में पानी आ गया, उससे काकी का माउथ में पानी आ गया। अब वो सोच रही थी कि काश वो सिर्फ एक पूड़ी अपने हाथ में ले सकती, फील करने के लिए कैसा लगता है वो। तो काकी ने सोचा कि वो कढ़ाई के सामने जाएगी और देखेगी पूड़ी फ्राई होते हुए। वो एक बच्चे की तरह अपने हाथ हाथ और पैर पर क्राउच करते करते जा रही थी। काकी थ्रेशोल्ड चुपचाप क्रॉस कर ली और कढ़ाई के पास जाकर बैठ गई। Rupa was almost run off her feet. Now in this room, now in that, now near the cooking area, then in the store. She was running in every direction, getting irritated, exasperated, yet attending to everything. It was in this state of mind that she saw Kaki sitting beside the kadhai. She was furious and reprimanded the old woman. Shame on you, she shouted as Kaki. She shouted at Kaki, "Why couldn't you sit in your room? The guests haven't eaten yet. No offering has been made to God, and you couldn't wait. Go back to your room. You will eat when the family eats. You are not a goddess who should be fed before all others." तो यहाँ बोला गया है कि रूपा जो थी वो सारा वर्कर्स को बताने में लगी हुई थी, कभी इस रूम में कभी उस रूम में, कभी कुकिंग एरिया में तो कभी स्टोर में। वो बहुत मतलब कि हर जगह वो दौड़ रही थी, इरिटेट होके मतलब बहुत ज़्यादा एनॉयड होके दौड़ रही थी, सब कुछ पर ध्यान रखते हुए। तो इसी गुस्से वाले उसके माइंड में उसने काकी को देख लिया कढ़ाई के सामने बैठे हुए, और वो बहुत फ्यूरियस और रिप्रीमेंडेड हो गए। रिप्रीमेंडेड मतलब क्या, स्कोल्डेड, मतलब कि वो काकी को डांटना शुरू कर दी कि शेम ऑन यू, शी शाउटेड एट काकी, मतलब कि वो बोलने लगी काकी को कि शर्म करो खुद पर, अभी ना गेस्ट्स खाए हैं ना गॉड को ऑफरिंग्स दिया गया है। Go back to your room. You will eat when the family eats. You are not a goddess who should be fed before all others. Kaki neither spoke nor cried. Quietly, she crept back to her room. The feast was ready. Leaf plates were laid on the floor. The guests began to eat. Kaki sat in her room, regretting her hasty behavior. She was not angry with Rupa. How could family members eat before the guests had eaten? She decided that she wouldn't go until she was called. The old woman hummed as she waited to be called. She thought of all the food awaiting her and felt that she had been singing for too long. She couldn't hear a sound. Why had no one called her? Kaki wondered. She stole into the courtyard. The guests were still seated, licking their fingers and enjoying the meal. They were shocked to see The old lady, Bodhiram, noticed her and became red with embarrassment. He caught hold of Kaki and pulled her back into her gloomy room. The guests had eaten, the family had eaten, the help had had their meal, but no one thought of Kaki. Only little Ladli felt both sorrow and surprise at her parents' behavior. Why hadn't they fed Kaki? Why hadn't Kaki been allowed to eat before the guests had been served? Ladli had hidden her share of puris in a basket for Kaki. It was 11 in the night. Rupa was fast asleep in the courtyard. Ladli had been unable to sleep. The basket which hid the puris lay by her side. When she was convinced that her mother was fast asleep, she picked up her basket and walked towards Kaki's room. Kaki lay in her room. She realized that everyone had gone to sleep after eating. Her stomach was churning with hunger. Her heart was filled with anguish. All of a sudden, she heard a voice. Get up, Kaki. I have brought puris for you. Kaki recognized Ladli's voice. She was delighted when Ladli gave her the puris. Has your mother sent these? Kaki asked. No, this is my share. Kaki pounced upon the puris. When Kaki had finished the puris, Ladli asked, Kaki, have you had your fill? Just as a light shower often makes the heat worse, the few puris had merely wet Kaki's craving, and she said, no, my daughter, go to your mother and bring some more. Ladli said, she is asleep. If I wake her, she will be most annoyed. Take me to the place where the guests were eating, she told Ladli. Ladli took Kaki by the hand and led her to the dining area. Kaki began to devour the leftovers from the leaf plates lying scattered all over. Just then Rupa woke up. She did not find Ladli by her side. She looked around and saw Ladli standing beside the used leaf plates. Then, to her horror, she saw Kaki picking crumbs from the leftovers and eating them. Rupa was stunned and ashamed. She lifted her hands towards heaven and prayed for mercy. How cruel I have been! Today was my son's engagement. Hundreds of people feasted, but I could not feast. An old helpless woman. Rupa lit a lamp and went into her storeroom. She piled a tray with food and took it to Kaki. Kaki, come and eat, she said to her with tears in her eyes. I have committed a great blunder today. Forgive me. It was already midnight. The sky was filled with stars, just as innocent children forget a rebuke after receiving a gift of sweets. Kaki ate, forgetting everything. Good wishes flowed from Kaki, and Rupa delighted at the sight of her relishing the meal. Translated by T.C. Ghai, Munshi Premchand. In what ways is old age similar to childhood? Answer. Old age is similar to childhood because in both these days one become dependent on others. Both the child and the old person are happy with simple things. Do you think the author approves or disapproves of Budhiram? The author disapproves of Budhiram and shows him as a character who did not have much respect to Kaki, but he pretended to show it as he got property from her. Kaki felt like weeping, but she did not do so. Why? It was the engagement ceremony of Budhiram's son, and it was a happy occasion. If she weeps in such moment, it will be regarded as something inauspicious or unlucky. What did Kaki see when she came to the courtyard? Kaki saw that guests were still seated, licking their fingers and enjoying their meals. Explain the words. A light shower often makes the heat worse. If we take a short shower during scorching heat of summer, our longing for getting bath gets more intense. Here in this story, a few puris that Ladli brought doubled Kaki's hunger. Now I am going to ask some extra questions from this chapter. What were some of daily habits of Kaki? Most of the part of the day, she would lie down. She had lost her interest in life except her craving for food. If she did not get her meal at the appointed time, she would begin wailing. Next question. Why did Kaki have to depend on Budhiram? Answer. Kaki had no one except her nephew Budhiram to depend upon and had given him all her property. Instead of the property of Kaki's, Budhiram promised to look after her. Which are the two expressions have been used for Rupa? The two expressions are sharp tongued and God fearing that are used for Rupa. Who among the family members was sympathetic to Kaki? How can we know this? Give two examples. Ladli was sympathetic towards Kaki, who was the daughter of Budhiram and Rupa. Whenever her elder brother teased Kaki, she would ran to Kaki. Instead of that, she had to give her meal to her, but little Ladli did not mind. What does clock of respectability mean? The word clock of respectability means to pretended to be respectful towards others. Next question. Statement. One evening the house was filled. Describe what people had been doing in that time. Answer. One evening Budhiram's son Sukhram was getting engaged. The house was filled with the sound of Shehnai. Women were singing on the house. Guests were relaxing and eating to their heart's content. What made Kaki uneasy? Why was she worried? The fragrance of the puris, kachoris, and spicy curries with the aroma of ghee and spices in open air made her feel uneasy. She was worried if she would get her part of meal or not. Describe how Kaki reached the place where foods were being prepared. Crouching on her hands and feet, Kaki slowly crossed the threshold and crept close to the kadhai where puris are being fried. Write what Kaki did and thought while she waited for food. Um, the old Kaki sang with closed lips and made a low sound as she waited to be called. She thought of all the food awaiting her and felt that she had been singing for too long. Next question. Then, to her horror, who was horrified and why? Rupa was horrified because she was horrified when she saw old Kaki picking crumbs from the leftovers and eating them. Ladli was standing by her side. What did she do then? She lifted her hands towards heaven and prayed for mercy. She thought how cruel she was that day. She fed to 100 people but cannot feed a old, helpless woman. She lit a lamp and went to the storeroom and brought a tray with food. Just as a light shower often makes the heat worse, the few puris had merely whet Kaki's craving, and she said, "No, my daughter, go to your room and bring some more." Who had brought the basket for Kaki? How did she feel about Kaki? The basket was brought by Ladli. Ladli was both sorrow and painful for Kaki. Where was Kaki at this point in the story? What time was it? At this point of time, Kaki was in her dark and gloomy room. What time was it? It was about already midnight. What comparison does the narrator use to describe Kaki's desire at this point in the story? The comparison is made with just as a light shower often makes the heat worse. The few puris had merely whet Kaki's craving. Just then Rupa woke up. She did not find Ladli by her side. She looked around and saw Ladli standing beside the used leaf plate. Rupa woke up in the midnight. What was special about the day? The day was special because it was Budhiram's and Rupa's son's engagement, named Shukram. What was the sight that horrified Rupa when she saw Ladli standing? The scene that horrified Rupa was that she saw Kaki picking crumbs from the leftovers and eating them. What were the sounds and aromas that filled the house on the day of engagement? The sound of shehnai and the aroma of puris, kachoris, and spicy curries filled the house on the day of the engagement. What is your opinion of Budhiram? Illustrate your opinion with events from the story. Budhiram was gentle by nature until his pocket remained untouched. How did Rupa react when she saw Kaki near a large frying pan? She did this because at that moment her mind was very furious and she was very reprimanded and curious. She was running in that room, then in that room, then in the store, supervising the workers.